I was standing in the lobby of a five-star hotel when my cousin walked past me like I was invisible. The same cousin who used to introduce me at family gatherings as the walking failure of the family. His designer suit probably cost more than I used to make in 6 months. I watched him laugh with his friends, that same condescending smile I'd seen 1,000 times. Then a journalist I didn't recognize approached him with a tablet, asking, "Is it true your cousin is the woman featured in this Forbes article? The tech entrepreneur worth over $100 million?" The color drained from his face, but I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand why that moment felt so sweet, you need to know what he did to me 3 years earlier. The day he convinced my entire family I was a failure who would never amount to anything. 3 years ago, I was living in a cramped studio apartment in Brooklyn, working 3 jobs just to keep the lights on. My startup had just collapsed after 18 months of pouring every cent I had into it. I'd maxed out 2 credit cards, borrowed money from friends I could barely look in the eye anymore, and watched my co-founder walk away with our only investor. I was 31 years old, sleeping 4 hours a night, and eating dollar ramen for dinner. That's when my aunt decided to throw her annual Thanksgiving dinner, the one event where my entire extended family gathered to measure each other's worth. My cousin Derek had just made junior partner at his law firm, and he made sure everyone knew it. I almost didn't go to that dinner. I sat in my car outside my aunt's house for 20 minutes, hands gripping the steering wheel, watching through the window as everyone arrived in their nice clothes and expensive cars. My Honda had a crack in the windshield I couldn't afford to fix. My dress was from a thrift store, altered by my own clumsy sewing because I couldn't pay for tailoring. But my mother had called me 3 times that week, her voice tight with that particular tone she used when she was disappointed in me, saying, "You can't keep isolating yourself, sweetheart. Family is family." So I walked in, carrying a store-bought pie because I didn't even have time to bake. And the moment I stepped through the door, I felt it. That collective shift in energy when someone unwanted enters a room. Derek was the first to notice me. He was standing by the fireplace, champagne glass in hand, surrounded by my uncles and his lawyer friends. His eyes landed on me, and something flickered across his face. Not quite pity, not quite disgust, but somewhere in between. "Well, well," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Look who decided to show up. We were starting to think you'd finally left town." A few people laughed nervously. My aunt rushed over to take the pie from my hands, barely making eye contact. "Oh, honey, you didn't have to bring anything," she said in that syrupy voice that actually meant the opposite. My mother was sitting on the couch next to my Uncle Richard, and when our eyes met, she gave me a tight smile and patted the seat next to her. But Derek wasn't done. He crossed the room with that confident stride he'd perfected in law school, the one that said he owned every space he entered. "So, how's the entrepreneur life treating you?" he asked, his smile sharp as glass. I should have walked away. I should have made an excuse and left right then. But something in me, pride, stubbornness, maybe just exhaustion, made me stand my ground. "It's been challenging," I said carefully, "but I'm working on something new." Derek's eyebrows shot up in mock surprise. "Oh, another startup? That's brave. What is it this time? Another app that nobody needs?" The room had gone quiet now. Everyone was watching. My Uncle Richard cleared his throat uncomfortably. My mother's hand found mine and squeezed, a silent plea for me to just let it go. But Derek was on a roll. He turned to his friends, gesturing at me like I was a case study. "My cousin here has started, let's see, 5 businesses in the last 10 years, and somehow every single one has crashed and burned. It's actually impressive in its own way." One of his friends chuckled, then caught himself when he saw my face. "Derek, that's enough," my mother said quietly, but her voice had no real force behind it. She never stood up to him. None of them did. Derek came from the successful side of the family. His father owned a chain of car dealerships. His mother was a real estate agent who closed million-dollar deals. My parents? My dad was a high school teacher who died of a heart attack when I was 19. My mom worked as a bookkeeper for a small accounting firm. We were the poor relatives, and everyone knew it. "I'm just being honest," Derek said, spreading his hands innocently. "Someone needs to tell her the truth. This whole follow your dreams thing? It's a fantasy. Some people are meant to build empires, and some people," he looked directly at me, "are meant to work for them." That's when something inside me cracked. Not broke. Cracked. Like ice on a frozen lake. The kind of crack that spreads slowly, quietly, until one day the whole surface gives way. I looked around the room at all these people I'd grown up with. My aunt who forgot to invite me to her daughter's wedding. My uncle Richard who once told me I should consider going back to school for something practical like nursing. My cousin Melissa, who stopped returning my calls after my second business failed. And my mother, sitting there with her hands folded in her lap, unable or unwilling to defend me. "You're right," I said, and my voice came out steadier than I expected. "You're absolutely right, Derek. Some people are meant to build empires." I picked up my purse from the chair where I'd left it. "I'm sorry I wasted everyone's time coming here. I have work to do anyway." I walked to the door and nobody stopped me. Nobody called my name. I heard my mother start to say something, but my aunt cut her off with some comment about dinner being ready. And just like that, I became invisible to them. I cried in my car for 15 minutes before I could see well enough to drive. Not because of what Derek said. I'd heard worse from investors who'd rejected my pitches, from landlords who'd threatened eviction, from the voice in my own head at 3 in the morning. I cried because some part of me had still believed that family meant something, that blood mattered, that when everything else fell apart, these people would be there. But they weren't. They never had been. When I finally pulled myself together and started the car, I made myself a promise. I was done trying to prove myself to them. I was done seeking their approval, their validation, their acceptance. From that night forward, I would disappear from their lives completely, and I would build something so undeniable, so massive, so successful, that one day they would hear my name and feel the weight of what they'd thrown away. What I didn't know that night, what I couldn't have known, was that my promise would come true faster than I ever imagined. The next morning, hungover from crying and a bottle of cheap wine I'd finished alone in my apartment, I got an email that changed everything. It was from someone named Marcus Chen, a venture capitalist I'd met briefly at a tech conference 6 months earlier. We'd talked for maybe 10 minutes about artificial intelligence and data processing. I'd given him my card, never expecting to hear from him again. His email was short. "I've been following your work. I think you're onto something with adaptive learning algorithms. Let's talk. I'm in New York next week." I stared at that email for a full hour, convinced it was a mistake or a scam. Nobody followed my work. My work was a graveyard of failed attempts and mounting debt. But I responded anyway, because what did I have to lose? We met at a coffee shop in Manhattan, one of those minimalist places where a cappuccino costs $8. Marcus was younger than I expected, maybe 35. Wearing jeans and a hoodie despite managing a fund worth hundreds of millions, he ordered for both of us without asking what I wanted, which should have annoyed me, but somehow didn't. "Tell me about the algorithm," he said before I'd even sat down. So I did. I told him about the 3 years I'd spent developing a machine learning system that could adapt educational content in real time based on how students actually learned, not how we assumed they learned. I told him about the prototype I'd built in my apartment, testing it on volunteer students from a community college, seeing their comprehension rates jump by 40%. I told him everything, and he listened without interrupting once, his dark eyes fixed on mine with an intensity that made me forget about my thrift store dress and cracked phone screen. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "How much money do you need?" I almost laughed. How much money did I need? I needed enough to eat something other than ramen. I needed enough to fix my car and pay my overdue electric bill. But I knew that wasn't what he was asking. "To build this properly," I said, "to hire a team, develop a full platform, run proper trials, I'd need at least $2 million to start." I expected him to laugh or make excuses or explain why that was impossible. Instead, he pulled out his phone, typed something, and showed me the screen. It was a wire transfer confirmation for $3 million. "That's your seed funding," he said. "I'm giving you $3 million, and I want 20% equity. You keep majority control. Build your team, build your platform, and show me what you can do. I think you're going to change education technology. I think you're going to build an empire." Those words, "build an empire," echoed in my head all the way home. The same words Derek had used to mock me. I didn't tell my mother about the funding. I didn't tell anyone in my family. For the next 18 months, I disappeared from their lives so completely that I might as well have moved to another country. I didn't return calls or show up to holidays. When my mother asked what I was doing, I gave vague answers about working on a project. She sounded hurt, confused, but I couldn't explain it to her. I couldn't risk them knowing, risk Derek finding out and somehow poisoning this one chance I had. I moved into a tiny office space in Brooklyn with 2 developers I'd headhunted from Google, a UX designer who believed in the vision enough to take a pay cut, and a business strategist who'd helped scale 3 previous startups. We worked 16-hour days, 7 days a week. We lived on coffee and takeout and the electric feeling that we were building something that mattered. The platform we built was called Adapt Learn, and it was revolutionary in ways that even I hadn't fully anticipated. The AI didn't just adjust difficulty levels, it understood learning styles, emotional states, attention patterns. It could tell when a student was frustrated and needed a break, when they were ready for a challenge, when they needed information presented visually versus textually. We beta tested it in 12 schools across 3 states, and the results were staggering. Students who'd been failing were suddenly thriving. Kids with learning disabilities were keeping pace with their peers. Teachers were reporting that for the first time in their careers, they felt like they could reach every student in their classroom. 6 months after launch, we had contracts with 200 schools. A year later, we had international interest from education ministries in 4 countries. And then, on a Tuesday morning in October, Marcus called me. Forbes wants to do a feature, he said. They're calling you one of the top tech entrepreneurs under 40. They want the full story, your background, how you built this, your vision for the future. I said yes to the interview, and I told them everything. Not about Derek. I wasn't petty enough to name names, but about being underestimated, about coming from nothing, about every door that had been slammed in my face. The journalist, a sharp woman named Rebecca Torres, seemed particularly interested in my family background. So your family wasn't supportive? She asked. I chose my words carefully. Let's just say they didn't believe this was possible. They thought I should be more realistic. Rebecca's eyes gleamed with that look journalists get when they sense a good angle. And now you're worth over $100 million. Have you spoken to them since your success? I hadn't. The truth was, I'd thought about calling my mother 100 times. I'd drafted texts I never sent. But every time I came close, I remembered that Thanksgiving dinner, the way they'd all watched Derek humiliate me and said nothing, the way my own mother had chosen keeping the peace over defending her daughter. The Forbes article came out on a Wednesday. By Thursday morning, my phone was exploding with messages I hadn't looked at yet. I was in San Francisco for a meeting with potential investors. We were planning a Series B funding round to expand internationally. I'd dressed carefully that morning, choosing a designer suit I'd bought without looking at the price tag, wearing confidence like armor. And that's how I ended up in that hotel lobby, watching Derek walk past me like I didn't exist, until that journalist approached him with her tablet. I saw his face when he realized what she was asking, saw the moment his brain caught up with her words. His mouth opened, then closed. His friends had gone quiet, watching the exchange. Yes, he finally stammered. That's my cousin. I didn't know she was. I haven't seen the article yet. The journalist smiled, professional but knowing. She speaks very highly of the importance of family support in her journey. Would you say you were part of that support system? I could have walked away then. I should have. But 3 years of silence, of working myself to exhaustion, of building something magnificent while my family wrote me off, it all rose up in me like a wave. I stepped forward, and Derek's eyes found mine. For just a second, I saw real fear cross his face. Derek, I said, my voice steady and clear. How nice to see you. He recovered quickly, that lawyer training kicking in, his face sliding into a practiced smile. I was just telling my colleagues about you. Congratulations on everything. We're all so proud. The journalist's eyebrows rose slightly. She wasn't stupid. She could hear the lie in his voice. That's interesting, she said. Because in her interview, your cousin mentioned that her family thought she should pursue something more realistic than entrepreneurship, that they didn't believe in her vision. I watched the color drain from Derek's face for the second time in 5 minutes. His friends had started to look uncomfortable, glancing at each other with that particular expression people get when they realize they're witnessing something awkward. Derek opened his mouth to respond, but I cut him off. It's fine, I said, looking directly at the journalist. Family dynamics are complicated. Not everyone could see the potential in what I was building. That's understandable. I turned to Derek, and I let him see everything in my eyes. Every humiliation, every sleepless night, every moment I doubted myself because people like him had told me I wasn't good enough. But Derek was right about one thing, I continued. He told me that some people are meant to build empires and some people are meant to work for them. He just got confused about which category each of us fell into. The silence that followed was exquisite. One of Derek's friends coughed. Another checked his phone. Derek himself looked like he wanted the marble floor to open up and swallow him. The journalist was typing rapidly on her tablet, clearly delighted with this unexpected development. I probably should have felt guilty about humiliating him in public, about taking my revenge in front of his colleagues. But I didn't. All I felt was a cold, clean sense of closure. Well, I said, checking my watch. A Cartier I'd bought the week before, another small luxury I'd earned. I have a meeting with some investors from Singapore. Enjoy your conference, Derek. I started to walk away, but his voice stopped me. Wait. I turned back. He was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen on his face before, something raw and uncertain. He started, then stopped. His friends were watching, the journalist was watching, and I could see him calculating, trying to figure out what to say that would salvage this situation. Finally, he settled on. I always knew you'd do something great. It was such a transparent lie that I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. No, Derek, I said quietly. You didn't. You thought I was a walking failure. You said it to my face in front of our entire family. You used me as a cautionary tale, a punchline, an example of what not to become. And you know what? That's okay, because you taught me something valuable that night. He swallowed hard. What's that? That I didn't need your belief. I didn't need your approval or your validation or your support. All I needed was my own stubborn refusal to give up. I smiled then, and it was genuine. So thank you, actually. You gave me the motivation I needed to disappear and build something extraordinary. You just didn't realize you'd never be part of it. This time, when I walked away, he didn't call after me. I heard the journalist ask him something, heard his stammered non-answer, but I didn't look back. I walked through that hotel lobby with my head high, feeling lighter than I had in 3 years. My phone started ringing before I even reached the elevator. It was my mother. I stared at her name on the screen for a long moment, my thumb hovering over the answer button. Part of me wanted to let it go to voicemail, to maintain the distance I'd carefully constructed. But another part of me, the part that was still that little girl who'd climbed into her mother's lap during thunderstorm, needed to answer. Hello? Sweetheart, her voice cracked, and I could tell she'd been crying. I just saw the Forbes article. Someone from the neighborhood sent it to me. Why didn't you tell me? I stepped into the elevator, watching the doors close on the lobby, on Derek, on that entire confrontation. Would you have believed me if I had? I asked. The silence on the other end was answer enough. I wanted to, she finally said. I wanted to believe in you. I was so scared for you. After your father died, after everything we lost, I couldn't bear to watch you fail again. So you let Derek tear me apart instead? The words came out harsher than I intended, but they needed to be said. You sat there and watched him humiliate me, and you said nothing. You chose him over me. I know, she whispered. I know, and I'm so sorry. I've thought about that night every day since you stopped calling. I wanted to reach out, but I was ashamed. And then the more time passed, the harder it got. The elevator doors opened on my floor. I stepped out into the quiet hallway, my heels clicking on the marble. I needed you, I said, and my voice broke. I needed you to believe in me when no one else did. I needed you to defend me. I needed you to be my mother, not just another person telling me to give up and be realistic. I'm so sorry, baby. I'm so sorry. She was crying openly now. Can you forgive me? Can we start over? I leaned against the wall, closing my eyes. Could I forgive her? I wasn't sure. The wound was still there, still raw despite all my success. I don't know, I admitted. I don't know if I can just forget 3 years of silence. I don't know if I can forget sitting in my car outside Aunt Rachel's house, crying because my own family made me feel worthless. I understand, she said. I understand if you need time. I needed you to know that I'm proud of you. So incredibly proud. And I'm sorry I didn't say it when you needed to hear it most. We talked for a few more minutes before I told her I had to go. The meeting with the Singapore investors was real, and I couldn't be late. But as I hung up, I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, not yet. But maybe the first small crack in the ice I'd built around my heart. The meeting went well. The investors were impressed, eager, ready to commit $50 million to our Series B round. As we shook hands and made plans for the next steps, I caught my reflection in the conference room windows. Successful, confident, powerful. Everything I dreamed of becoming. But that night, alone in my hotel room, I found myself thinking about Derek's face in that lobby. The shock, the embarrassment, the desperate attempt to save face. And I realized something that surprised me. I didn't feel victorious. I felt empty. I'd spent 3 years building toward that moment. The moment when my family would see what they'd dismissed, when Derek would have to eat his words, when I could prove them all wrong. And now that it had happened, now that I'd had my revenge, it felt hollow. The success was real. The company was real. The $100 million was real. But using it as a weapon against the people who'd hurt me, that didn't bring the satisfaction I'd imagined. I picked up my phone and scrolled through the messages that had piled up since the Forbes article dropped. There were hundreds. Former classmates, old friends, distant relatives, all suddenly wanting to reconnect. And there, buried in the middle, was a message from Derek. I almost deleted it without reading. But curiosity won out. "I know I don't deserve your time," it began, "and I know an apology can't undo what I said to you. But I need you to know that I was wrong. Completely, utterly wrong. Not just about your potential, I was wrong about everything. I spent the last 3 years building my career, stepping on people, measuring my worth by how much more successful I was than everyone around me. And today, watching you walk through that lobby, so confident and accomplished, I realized I've been building the wrong thing. You built something that matters. You built something that helps people. I built a reputation, a facade, and it's not enough. I don't expect your forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that you were right and I was wrong. And I'm genuinely sorry." I read the message 3 times, searching for insincerity, for manipulation, for some hidden agenda. But all I found was what looked like genuine remorse. I didn't respond. Not that night. Instead, I called Marcus Chen. "How does it feel?" he asked when he picked up. "How does what feel?" "Being vindicated, being proven right, finally showing everyone who doubted you." I was quiet for a moment, watching the lights of San Francisco through my hotel window. "It feels like I won a battle I didn't actually want to fight," I said finally. Marcus laughed, that warm, knowing laugh of his. "That's growth," he said. "You know, when I first met you, I saw the talent and the drive. But I also saw the anger, the chip on your shoulder. I knew that anger would fuel you for a while, help you push through the hard times. But I also knew that eventually, you'd have to let it go." "I'm not sure I know how," I admitted. "Yes, you do," he said. "You just have to decide what you're building toward. Are you building toward revenge, or are you building toward something bigger?" That question kept me awake most of the night. By morning, I knew what I needed to do. I called my mother first. "I want to have coffee," I said. "Just the two of us. No Aunt Rachel, no Derek, no extended family drama. Just us." "When?" she asked, and I could hear the hope in her voice. "Next week. I'll fly into New York. I'll be there, anywhere you want." The conversation was short, but it felt like a beginning. Then I did something that surprised even myself. I responded to Derek's message. "I accept your apology," I wrote. "Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve to let go of the anger. What you said to me 3 years ago was cruel and wrong, and it hurt in ways you probably can't imagine. But I'm done letting that night define me. I'm done letting you define me. I built something extraordinary, and I did it without your belief or your approval. That's my victory. The rest is just noise." I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The Forbes article had one more unexpected consequence. 2 days after it published, I got an email from a high school in Detroit. The principal had read the article and wanted to know if I'd be willing to come speak to their students, specifically to the kids in their entrepreneurship program who came from low-income families. "They need to see someone who came from where they're from," the email said, "someone who understands that success isn't just for people who start with advantages." I said yes immediately. A month later, I stood in front of 200 teenagers in a school gymnasium that smelled like old basketballs and floor wax. I told them my story, not the sanitized version I'd given Forbes, but the real one. The maxed out credit cards, the ramen dinners, the nights I'd cried myself to sleep wondering if I was delusional to keep trying. The family that told me to give up, and then I told them about the work, the 16-hour days, the hundreds of failed prototypes, the rejections from investors who couldn't see what I was building. "Success isn't a straight line," I told them. "It's not about being the smartest person in the room, or having the most connections or starting with money. It's about refusing to quit when everything and everyone tells you to quit. It's about believing in yourself when no one else does." After my talk, students lined up to ask questions. One girl, maybe 16 with bright eyes and worn-out sneakers, asked, "What do you do when the people who are supposed to believe in you don't?" I thought about my mother, about that Thanksgiving dinner, About 3 years of silence. You believe in yourself anyway, I said. You find people who do believe in you, mentors, friends, partners who see your vision, and you prove the doubters wrong, not because you need their validation, but because you need to prove it to yourself. She nodded, and I saw something in her face that I recognized. That same fierce determination I'd felt sitting in my car outside my aunt's house. That same refusal to accept other people's limitations. Flying home from Detroit, I realized something that Marcus had been trying to tell me all along. The empire I'd built wasn't just adapt learn, or the $100 million, or the Forbes recognition. The real empire was what I'd built inside myself. The unshakable belief that I could create something meaningful. The resilience to keep going when everything fell apart. The wisdom to know that success tastes hollow when it's motivated by revenge. I met my mother for coffee the following week, in a small cafe in Brooklyn, not far from that cramped studio apartment where I'd eaten dollar ramen and dreamed of something more. She looked older than I remembered, more fragile, and when she hugged me, she held on just a little too long. We talked for 3 hours. She told me about the years after Dad died, about the fear that had driven every decision she made. I told her about the loneliness of those first startup years, about how many times I'd wanted to call her but couldn't bear the thought of hearing doubt in her voice. "I'm so proud of you," she said finally, tears streaming down her face. "And I'm so sorry I didn't say it when you needed to hear it. I'm sorry I let fear make me small. And I'm sorry I tried to make you small too." I reached across the table and took her hand. It was shaking slightly, and I could feel how much courage it had taken for her to say those words. "I forgive you," I said, and as the words left my mouth, I felt that ice around my heart finally crack completely. "I forgive you, and I love you, and I want you in my life. But I need you to understand, I'm not the same person I was 3 years ago. I'm not going to shrink myself to make anyone comfortable, not even you." "I don't want you to shrink," she said firmly. "I want you to soar, and I want to be there cheering you on if you'll let me." We finished our coffee and walked through Brooklyn together, past the building where I'd lived during those hardest years. I didn't feel angry anymore when I looked at it. I felt grateful. 6 months later, AdatLearn closed our Series B funding at $75 million. We expanded into 12 new countries. Our platform was being used by over 3 million students worldwide, and the data showed we were genuinely changing lives, closing achievement gaps, helping struggling students thrive, making education accessible in ways that had never been possible before. I attended my first family gathering since that disastrous Thanksgiving dinner. Derek was there, and we were cordial but distant. Some wounds heal, but they leave scars. My mother stood beside me the whole night, and when anyone asked about my work, she beamed with pride so fierce it almost made up for the years of doubt. As I drove home that night, I realized I'd finally built the empire Derek had mocked me for dreaming about. But it wasn't the empire I'd imagined back then, not built on revenge or validation or proving people wrong. It was built on something better, the unshakable knowledge that I was enough, with or without their approval, and that made all the difference.